Hi everyone, and to everyone who's dialing in from around the world. I'm Andrea Newman and I'm responsible for our wonderful brand that we have. We've all gathered today to hear from PhD, but I thought I'd just briefly talk to you about why I'm here and why you're all here. You quite rightly asked what was it about PhD that led us to appoint them as our global media agency. So they've very kindly put together an agenda, which I think we've got 2 hours, to give you a sort of whistle-stop tour of everything that got presented to us. But the other thing I just wanted to touch on was why I am here. I had the privilege of being part of the agency review, and the code name for the agency review was Project Sunshine. And we did that because I think we all felt it was always going to end up as a positive experience for everyone involved and with a positive outcome. And I think I can quite confidently say all that was achieved in an excruciatingly short amount of time. So the things that we looked for generally as we went through the process were the commercials, the chemistry, the tools and the technology. So they were sort of main themes we were assessing all the agencies on. And without sounding like I'm an extra in Jerry Maguire, which also ages me, that's my reference. When I walked into the PhD meeting, it was a bit like that first date, and I just knew then that this is who I wanted to work with and who I wanted HSBC to work with. So when I sat in that first meeting with PhD, I was sitting there sort of with my fingers crossed thinking, don't screw up the commercials, don't screw up the commercials, because the chemistry was so obvious from the beginning. So I hope you'll find there is something for everyone today. And I've had a lot of great feedback from everyone who has worked with PhD so far, both from our agencies and from our own teams here at HSBC. For those who haven't yet had the experience, hopefully you will understand over the next few weeks and months why we chose them. So just before I hand over to Mike Cooper, who's the global CEO of PhD, I'm just going to do the techie bit. So we're not going to have time for Q&A today, unfortunately, but you can submit your questions online via the webcast. So if you include your email, and then we'll endeavour to answer all your questions within the next week or so. So that's it from me. I'd like to hand over to Mike.
Morning, everybody. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today for this, and thanks to Andrea for that wonderful introduction. I learned some things there I didn't know, so that was, and we didn't screw up the commercials, so that's good. I just want to say this is actually, yesterday was our first official day on the business, so the timing of this presentation is really, really appropriate. It's very, very good. And I just wanted to sort of echo on one of the things that Andrea said about the process. The project name, as Andrea just said, was Project Sunshine. And, I mean, for us, it was an incredibly uplifting, positive, optimistic, energetic process. I mean, it was in a very condensed, short time frame, but we really enjoyed doing it. We had an awful lot of fun doing it, and not all pitches are like that. And since then, I mean, I think I've been quoted in the press once or twice talking about just what a positive experience it was. And part of the reason why there is so much press interest in it is that most pitches can be kind of like quite brutal in this day and age. And I think it was just so refreshing to have a major client conducting a pitch in that way. And some credit should also go to ID Comms for conducting the pitch in that sort of positive, energetic way. So what we're going to do today is to take you through the presentation that we did for the pitch. It is largely about HSBC. There is a short introduction to PhD, which I'm going to take care of now. But most of this presentation, you will be relieved to hear, is about HSBC. So the first thing about us, PhD, we are part of Omnicom Group. We're part of Omnicom Media Group. What that means from a client perspective is that we have all the kind of scale and resources of a really large media organisation, but it allows us as PhD to kind of be as ourselves. And as you'll see, we have a very planning-led heritage and a very planning-orientated culture. But kind of areas like investment, in areas like data, technology, analytics, we can rely on the group to provide us with us. So we argue that really provides us with the best of both worlds. One thing, we wanted to make very clear at the beginning in terms of our philosophy and our DNA as an organisation is that we're open, we're unbiased. We don't, as a sort of philosophy at Omnicom, own any stakes in media companies, data companies, technology companies. So, the decisions that we recommend for clients are always unbiased. And we're also, as our origins are as a media independent at PhD, we are used to working with a vast array of different creative agencies. We weren't born out of a creative agencies. We're not a media dependent. So we take great pleasure in working with a very wide range of different creative agencies all around the world. And to be honest with you, that's kind of our comfort zone. We work very well in that area. So I think, we've enjoyed great relationships with many of HSBC's creative agencies, JWT and Saatchi's on other clients as well. So that's, and Gray as well, on other pieces of business like GSK. So, we're very comfortable in that environment. And I must say the creative agencies have gone out of their way to make us feel really, really welcome as part of this process. And I'd just like to say thank you for that because it's really meant something to us. So that's been really cool. We have been the fastest growing media agency. We'll come on to talk about the clients in just a moment. But over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been growing very, very rapidly. We now have around 6,000 people in 90 offices around the world at PhD. And what it means is, just very simply, we're everywhere where HSBC needs us to be. We have offices in all the kind of key locations. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the clients that we work with. We work with a number of major packaged goods companies like Unilever, GSK, Ferrero, for example. We work with a number of digital companies like Google, SAP, Hewlett-Packard, for example. But we also do quite a lot of work in the automotive area, and the reason for that is that at the beginning of last year, Volkswagen Group consolidated all of their business into PhD, which was the largest media consolidation in history at the time. So we do all of the Volkswagen Group business, some of which we run from London, but we also run the business from hubs in places like Prague and Barcelona and obviously in Germany as well. So, those are the kind of clients that we work with. And what I would say is, they're all, in their own areas, high growth. A number of them, companies like Unilever and Volkswagen, for completely different reasons, come from business sectors which are going through an enormous amount of disruption at the moment. So we kind of understand that environment. If you think about it, just about every sector on the planet is going through an enormous amount of disruption at the moment. So, we're very comfortable kind of existing in that world. Our background as an agency, we were founded in 1990. I think one of the things that works for us very well as an agency, quite honestly, is having a very strong culture at PhD. We were planning-led back in 1990. Today, we're still planning-led. We have more planning resources than any other organisation, and you'll be hearing about some of our planning capability during the course of this presentation. But that's very, very important to us. It's a really kind of key part of our DNA, and I think it's important because it does help to set us apart from the world of media agencies, which I sometimes do feel is a little bit of a sea of sameness in some ways. So I think it's very good indeed that we set ourselves apart in that way. In the Gunn report, which was just published recently, the latest one, showed us at number 2 in the world. I think I made a little joke in the pitch that we compared ourselves purely at random with some other media agencies around the world, and I can't think why we selected these ones. But awards are very important to us because, if you think about it being a planning-based agency, coming up with strategic ideas for agencies, the creativity and the innovation in those ideas is the kind of output, and the prize is winning awards, much in the same way as a creative agencies, all highly valued awards. So we've won over 600 awards since 2014, including 95 Cannes Lions. We won more Media Lions this year than any other media agency. As I say, that's incredibly important to us. We put an awful lot of emphasis on it. I hope it continues. In terms of thought leadership, this is something that, again, is a way that we try and set ourselves apart. I think for the last 10 years, we've been on the main stage at Cannes launching a new thought leader piece. And along the way, we've had some great sessions. 3 years ago, we took Sir Tim Berners-Lee to Cannes to launch Sentience, our piece on artificial intelligence and its impacts on marketing. We're quite proud of the fact that these days everybody's talking about AI, but we were talking about the impact of AI on marketing 3 years ago. We've worked with Adam Morgan, the Challenger brand expert, on a piece called Overthrow, which we launched a few years ago. And last year, we launched a piece called Merge, which is about the merger of people and technology. And very happy to share any of that thinking with you. They're all published as short books. They only take about 45 minutes to read, I promise. So if you're going on a sort of short flight somewhere or a commute home, they can be digested in that period of time. And they are, I promise you, quite readable. So do let us know if you'd like to get access to those. But again, this is a way of us setting out the future for PhD and making sure that our agency is future-facing as an organisation. It's very, very important. Right, so what I'm going to do now is to introduce you to two of our most important people. So Amy Donovan, who is the Global Account Lead for PhD, and Mark Holden, the Global Strategy Lead. You may be wondering why we didn't find some better photographs of them, but these photos were taken in the archive, and as you can see, they were taken perhaps as a bit of an afterthought. So we promise you we'll get them down to a studio at some point and get some more polished ones done. So I think, first of all, I'm handing over to Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. There's quite a few creative agency people in the room, and one thing that you'll be very familiar with is that when you pitch for a piece of business, you often come up with a theme. So the theme for our presentation was Grow More Together. And for the non-agency people in the room, a theme is actually quite important because it galvanises the people on the pitch, of course, but it also seems to have a lasting effect after. So these things can be quite important, and they set the tone and direction for us. So we thought it was important to get that right, and of course it chimed very well with the philosophy and the positioning of HSBC, so it said a lot. We wanted to deliver on that, give that real kind of agency, if you like, by saying that we'll grow more together by bringing everything together. And that means, of course, people, so us working closely with all the creative agency partners. But also it means technology. So HSBC have in place technology already. We want to make sure that we actually bring together our technology and our data together and bring them all together into one environment. And the reason we want to do that, and one of the things that we made a point of leading with in our presentation, was that we want to get to a situation where we can what's called close the loop. Closing the loop is effectively where the action, where the decision, if you like, so which ad to which individual, in which sequence, in which environment, that decision and the result of that decision are linked together. So after a while, the feedback loop starts to make the decision. So in that environment, in that sort of AI-driven environment, a lot of the micro decisions that the junior people within PhD offices might make can instead be made more effectively by AI. So that's something that, although sounds a little bit worrying, actually it's fundamental to replacing some of the more menial tasks that we do. And that then allows us to move above and start doing more interesting things. What are those? It's finding new technologies, replacing out an existing ad server with something else, bringing in a new native DSP, doing second-party data deals. There's a range of different marketing and digital-based services that a media agency really needs to offer now. And we're building teams in place to do exactly that. And we made the point of saying that we'll do all of that for HSBC. And if we do that for HSBC, which we will, that will not transform financial services, marketing services. Because everyone else will be doing it as well. In fact, if you go to many marketing conferences now, everyone's talking about data, everyone's talking about technology, the industry has become hypnotized by it. So, of course, we need to do these things. We need to put in place this infrastructure. But we mustn't be myopic and focus on it too much, because it presents lots of potential dangers. So one example of a danger. Media agencies in the past would come up with these PowerPoint charts and they would define these target audiences. But the practical reality is you couldn't reach these people exclusively. You could bias, for example, TV programs towards them, but you still reach pretty much everyone. Nowadays, in a data-driven, programmatic world, you can reach those people almost exclusively. Sounds good, but if you look at the buyer base of most brands, you'll find that a large percentage of the buyer base are outside that target audience. And if you just laser target, you'll find that you'll start to reduce your awareness amongst the broader audiences and the rate of sale drops. So there's lots of potential banana skins that we hope our competitors will slip on. So we do need to put in place this infrastructure, but we need to make sure that we don't stop there, we go beyond that. Because we know that the only way to transform financial services marketing is through this. There's interesting research, and we've done some research ourselves to show the payback of a great innovation, great strategic thinking over just the standard sort of optimization that we might do every day. But the one I really like is the IPA study. So some of you may have seen this already, but this looked at all of the award-winning work that's been submitted as part of the IPA database, and they looked and they compared the performance of the campaigns that won awards versus those that haven't. And they look at a measure called share market elasticity, and that's how much your share market's going to grow next year based on any overspend you make. And they found that the award-winning campaigns were 500% greater. So not 3, 4, 5, 6%, 10%, 500%. So that's the only way we're going to really, really make dramatic leaps. So that's why we heavily focus on that. Now, of course, that's important for every client. Every client this is important for. But it's really important for HSBC because the category is changing so much. In this changing landscape, strategic thinking makes a bigger difference than ever before. And in a sense, you could argue that in this new landscape, marketing within HSBC is starting to take center stage, because the ability to manage a fintech threat or a fintech opportunity with something clever could be transformative for the business. So we have obviously put together people to be able to deliver on that, but we've got infrastructure, so strategic planning infrastructure as well. So I'm not talking about marketing tech stuff, like data analytics stuff. I'm talking about strategic layer of technology that allows us to work together and come up with ideas. And that's called Source. Source is our strategic workflow environment, and it allows us to connect people together, and it focuses on strategy and innovation. I'm going to play you a little quick video, if that's okay, on this, and then I'm going to come back and just pick out the key benefits, I think, for how when we all work together.
Source is PhD's operating system, the platform on which we plan campaigns. It's also a global collaboration platform for ideas. The first step is to set up a campaign. For a global campaign, you can assign countries for the brief and also other collaborators for building the campaign. You can establish an optimal total budget or a budget split across a portfolio or between countries. Using Dig, one of several proprietary source tools, we then explore the research we need to fully understand the brief and a brand's category. We then identify the role for communications, which describes what type of media and messaging should reach audiences in each segment of the consumer model. The selection of comms model has implications for channel selection and also messaging. Now let's talk about the design stage. This is where global collaboration happens. Because everyone at PhD is using Source, we all help our colleagues crack ideas, wherever they may be. Channel selection is creativity-driven, but sense-checked based on the channel's target audience, CPM, and the role for communications. We then identify the correct investment allocation between channels via multi-channel reach optimization. Once the correct allocations are set, we flight the activity based on typical ad stocks for the category. And maximizing a measure called weekly resonance allows us to make dramatic improvements to sales impact. Finally, we set the media, marketing, and business KPIs by which the campaign should be tracked to measure success. And to share our thinking with our clients, Source has Showtime. which automatically generates a browser-based interactive real-time presentation. Source writes presentations so that we don't have to. Instead, we spend time helping PhDers around the world develop the ideas that grow our clients' brands and businesses. Because when you work with PhD, you don't just have 2 or 3 people working on your business, you have 2,000 or 3,000. That's Source. Game-changing planning from PhD.
You must change that music at some point. It's not quite. But the key benefits for that, I think, for us and how we all work together are the first one we captured, which was global to local connection. So the ability for us to get our local markets that are going to execute the campaign at some point to contribute to the campaign is quite important because it means they're more motivated to execute on it. And also it means that when we create a global campaign in Source, we can push a button and it splits it, and local markets get access to the campaign in that environment, so they can build from there. So it really creates that deep, connected handshake. That's a really important point. That really enables us to do global planning. Marketing science is baked into the system. There's 24,000 words written behind the scenes that you can tap into, but marketing science has become increasingly more important to HSBC, and it's embedded in the system. It really produces tremendous amounts of innovation. I mean, if every campaign we put on the system, we're building your campaigns into the system now, we'll get 30 to 40 ideas from around the network. Not all of them are good, but you'll get 2 or 3 that are little gems that you can use that you would never perhaps have had. A consistent approach. You can go around the world and you can go, right, okay, this is a reinforcing campaign. Of course it is, but we're going to build in a block of activating here because we want to convert people at this point here. Get it? So there's a common language. It means that you stop focusing on the paradigms that agencies use and you actually focus instead on the actual solution because we don't have to keep talking about the different approach each time. And then, of course, a quality threshold. So we know that our local markets are using multi-channel reach to set the right allocation between channels. And they're not just kind of doing that. So that's another really important thing. So that's Source, that's the infrastructure. But Source is only as good as the people that, of course, are using it. And that's why the other part we wanted to talk about was the human element. And probably the most human person you're going to meet today is Amy. I'm probably the most inhuman. Right. So I'm going to let Amy talk about the human thing, because otherwise it'll just be weird. Amy, you should talk about the human thing.
Thank you. That was a weird introduction, Mark. A most human person. Thank you. I'll take it. Of course, our people are our most important asset, and the human part of any business. So what we do in terms of how we structure our skill sets is we look at people's cognitive bias to make sure that we place the right skill sets and the right people in the right lanes. So if we have a look at some of our key sort of disciplines and skill sets, you'll have a look at the cognitive bias of those. So for example, our strategy directors are people who have real clarity of mind, and they're able to unpack complex marketing challenges into communications tasks that are clean and clear. Our innovation directors are digital natives and technology obsessives by nature, versus our market engagement function, which are highly structured, highly organized people who love connecting. So what's really important for us is that we have these people in the areas they're most comfortable and most expert, and we create a framework that puts them in the right place at the point in our communications planning process. So we have 5 key areas in terms of how we've designed the team for HSBC. And that starts with strategy and innovation, digital leadership, activation, and market engagement, with, of course, account management at the center, making sure everything's running smoothly. This ensures that the right talent is pulled in at the right time in the process. We have created the global team for HSBC based on this structure against the groups. And of course, we dial up or dial down the skill sets based on the specific briefs that we have received, so that it's really adapted by group. And this framework will be replicated in local markets based on your local business. And of course, as Mike was saying, yesterday was our first official day on the business, and it gives me great pleasure to show you our global team at a flash. There they all are. Extremely excited. Everyone's really honored to work on the business. But there's a few key people I would like to focus in today to introduce you to as our fantastic speakers that are going to be presenting the work that we did on the original pitch day. So we have Rohan, who's our Global Head of Strategy, supported by Phil, our Group Innovation Director, who will take you through the fantastic prosperity brief. That will be followed by Hannah, our Group Strategy Director, and Matt, our Innovation Director, on the Belt and Road Initiative response. We have Chloe, our Chief Digital Officer, on our marketing platform, data and tech. We have Rebecca, our Head of Planning for user experience at PhD UK, taking through the digital always-on acquisition brief. And then we have James Buckle, our Head of Programmatic, going through our digital migration strategy. And closing with Ian Clark, our Executive Sponsor, from transition to delivery. A nice little wrap-up of everything we've been through to date. And we thought it would be a really good idea to just add this refresher from the media review invitation we received from the Steerco. And in the note on the front page, Leanne Cutts had written, excuse me, I'm just going to make sure I get it right. We see media as one of our most powerful tools to connect with our consumers. And in that, we had, HSBC provided this fantastic and very inspiring theme of make it magic, make it work, and make it thrive. And we ended up adopting this as a way to assess all of the work that we delivered as a part of the pitch. So it's always nice to step back into where we came from on this fantastic work. So I'm delighted to introduce the agenda for today. It's split into two sections. So we will now take you through the response on prosperity, followed by the Belt and Road. We'll then have a 15-minute break, and then there's the more digital half of the section, and then we'll close with Ian on the transition highlights. So I'd like to welcome up Rohan and Phil to take you on a journey of prosperity. Hope you enjoy.
Thank you, AV. Good morning, everyone. Advancing the prosperity of those that HSBC serves starts by living your brand promise through communication and doing so with an emotional resonance that gives you a place in people's minds and in global culture. As we embark on this exciting new relationship together as people in the business, as creative agency partners, we would really like to help you realise this with simple, clear communication strategies. For the pitch, we were asked a very simple and clear question of the themes driving prosperity today, tomorrow and into the future, and in short, how HSBC can capitalise on those. And in answering this question, today we're going to talk you through a comms approach for your brand promise to thrive upon, a media idea that will scale prosperity globally and across the breadth of your customer base, and a system that will help drive the impact and adoption of brand-led activities in local markets around the world. And it was the perfect time to be having this conversation on the day of the pitch, and it's the perfect time to be having this conversation today, because as a global society, we have never been more prosperous. And for HSBC, there has never been a better time to be in the business of prosperity. So let's unpack that a little bit first and start to look at what we mean by prosperity. So the HSBC brand promise starts to, rightly so, break down prosperity into a more holistic set of measures that take us from, I suppose, the very functional material wealth, which historically is defined by GDP, into much softer measures such as social well-being and personal well-being. But it is the combination of these factors that matter, because these combination of factors create our sense of positivity, our ability to look toward the future with optimism, and simply put, they create our sense of prosperity. A sense of prosperity is incredibly important for your categories because people have to look toward the future with optimism and positivity if they are going to invest in it. So if we look at some of the themes that are driving this sense of prosperity, we see three macro themes that are going to impact the way in which your categories work, but also the way in which societies and economies function at large. So the first of this is more information. So we are seeing greater access to and demand for the type of information that can empower people, businesses and communities. In breaking down the barriers to accessing information, we're allowing many more to map their own pathways to prosperity. For example, information that has flowed around the world since 1900s is now seeing 85% of the global population as literate. That was just 20% at the turn of the last century. We're also seeing more people and an increase in the number of people that banks can talk to as the world starts to become a bit more balanced in terms of demographic, gender equality and human rights. New customers are emerging in spaces where they didn't exist before, and simply put, the world is becoming a fairer place that allows more people to take a share in global prosperity. For example, between 2011 and 2014, we saw 700 million people open bank accounts for the first time, and the unbanked population over that period fell by 20%. So many more are taking a share in prosperity. And finally, we're seeing more dynamism, and that's just because disruption in markets is creating new opportunities for businesses to grow by better serving the often more flexible and diverse needs of customers. So we've got three macro forces driving prosperity, but of course we're also seeing a set of counter forces, and for all the more information that people are being given, we're also seeing the greater potential for misinformation. For all the more people that are coming into economic participation, we're also seeing greater stress being placed on the systems and structures that underpin society. And for all the more dynamism that we're seeing in markets, we're seeing an equal amount of volatility because, of course, change does not benefit everyone. But running through this is something much deeper, something intrinsically human, and something we believe could provide a potent opportunity for HSBC. And that is attention at the heart of prosperity. We should play the video.
How prosperous are we, and how do we view our future? Many have lost optimism, but we have more reasons to be optimistic today than at any time in history. For the first time in the history of the world, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little. More people die from old age than from infectious diseases. As a global community, we have never been more prosperous, and there has never been a better time to be in the business of prosperity. But why don't we feel it? It is not that the world is getting worse, it is that information is getting better. And we are hardwired for bad information. It's how humans have survived. Last year, 314,000 people were lifted out of poverty and into prosperity every single day. Yet the news tells us a very different story. Your brand promise provides the means to address this paradox at the heart of prosperity and lift the world towards recognizing their own sense of prosperity.
So it's not that the world is getting worse, it's that information is getting better and we are hardwired for bad information. So let's unpack that insight a little bit and look at some data sets that go back about the last 40 years or so. So in this time, between 1980 and the present day, we have seen global GDP, of course our measure of material prosperity, increase by 174%. In this time, we've seen the percentage of people living in open, free democracies increase to its highest point ever, 46%. In this time, we've seen the numbers of people lifted above the poverty line into prosperity, into participation in the economy, skyrocket. 2.7 billion people have been lifted out of poverty between 1980 and the present day. It's an incredible amount of people. And if we were to look at age, and comparatively, this looks like a pretty fat line, but in my time, between 1980 and the present day, the life expectancy of an individual in the UK has increased by 10 years. I mean, isn't that incredible? Everyone in this room is going to live 10 years longer, just from the progress we've had in the last 40 years. So actually, as a global society, we have never been doing better. There has never been, statistically, a better time to be alive. So if we start to look at the way in which we reflect on our prosperity, the way in which we talk about prosperity in the media, surely that would reflect that. But of course that's not the case, because we're hardwired for bad information. And this red line here is collected by the BBC, who've studied the sentiment in news broadcasts around the world over the last 40 years. And as you can see, whilst the world is getting better and better and better in terms of the indices that define prosperity, the way in which we report on the world is getting much, much worse. We're unable to acknowledge our own sense of prosperity. So we have a gap. But that gap is not in material prosperity. That gap is not in societal well-being. That gap isn't even in political equality. There is a gap, but that gap exists in people's minds, and it's being created by bad information, the way in which we present our point of view on prosperity. And I think the question we should all ask ourselves is, how can HSBC help people see through this and see through into the reality of prosperity, break down the barriers that are created by bad information? One thing is for sure is that talking prosperity is not enough. You guys will know much better than us that your competitive set talk about prosperity or similar territories, sometimes explicitly in messaging. Talking Together We Thrive starts to bridge this. It gives you a distinctive voice, and more importantly, it gives you a point of view in the world which lifts you above the categories. But we think Acting Together We Thrive can help you take this a couple of steps further, turning it into a behaviour, a set of actions. What does this mean? To address that problem with bad information, well, it means we need to give people more than just good information. It means we actually need to give people the skills, the tools to turn that information into knowledge, the knowledge that will allow them to assess their own prosperity. And the great thing about knowledge is that we already have collective strength in it. Around the world, and the great minds of today, buried deep in HSBC's organisation, we just need to harness it. So, your promise is Together We Thrive. We will deliver this by harnessing our collective strength, but to help people turn information into the knowledge that will allow them to acknowledge their own sense of prosperity. One of the ways in which we said we could do this was really through a pitch idea, which is a set of content partnerships and initiative, which we created a wrapper around, which we called HSBC Thrive Mind. We're just going to show you a little video as to what that might or could look like.
What we think drives what we do. The better the thoughts, the better the actions. That's how HSBC can help people thrive. By sharing thoughts, sharing wisdom, and everyone has a part to play. By gathering the best global ideas for thriving, voiced by authentic global citizens, we can harness that collective strength to become healthier, wealthier, and wise. Introducing HSBC Thrive Mind, a brand platform dedicated to sharing the best global ideas for thriving, driven by the authentic voices of connected global citizens. Thrive Mind is an ideas factory and a content engine, blending the wisdom of the brightest minds and smartest thinkers with the voices of everyday global citizens and voices from within HSBC. Employees, experts, and from inside your existing partnerships. 3 sources of knowledge about how to thrive, captured, accumulated, and shared by HSBC, embedded within your marketing ecosystem and exploded out via paid, owned, and earned. Together, we will create the ultimate self-help guide for global society, because together, we thrive.
So that idea again then is the best knowledge captured, accumulated and shared and turned into life lessons, stories, units of wisdom and know-how, spread across countries, spread across cultures, spread across communities and of course, as you'll see, spread across channels. Now it's worth just reiterating just for 1 second that this is obviously a pitch concept, but what we really want to find out is if this is a mind full of fantastic knowledge and wisdom and know-how, how do we actually fill that source of, how do we actually fill that brain? And as we say in the video, and as we said in the pitch, we have 3 sources of knowledge, of global wisdom to fill that Thrive Mind, starting with knowledge partners. So the whole point about this first source of knowledge or source of wisdom or source of know-how to attack some of the concerns that Rohan highlighted earlier on is to have integrated partnerships with some of the most prestigious multimedia knowledge and learning platforms, collaborating with the brightest minds and the brightest thinkers and exploding out their knowledge and their wisdom on how to thrive in the 21st century, repackaging all of that fantastic good news and getting it out there. Now, at global level, we mentioned that we already have a relationship with the School of Life, Alain de Botton there. I don't know if anybody has come across that. Anybody that doesn't know, it's kind of, Alain de Botton is a modern-day philosopher and takes ancient wisdom and repackages it and finds application for the modern day. And also, we have a relationship with Intelligence Squared, and I'm not sure if anybody's come across that either, which is, again, a multimedia knowledge and learning platform that has discussion of very contemporary issues from fintech to bioengineering. And the point about platforms such as these is that they have fantastic extensive media networks, websites, books, podcasts, videos, and all of those networks have amazing commercial opportunities. And what we were proposing is that we have joint branded content that helps repackage all of that fantastic thriving knowledge that's out there and to explode it out via these paid, owned and earned networks by these knowledge partners. But it's not just about that sort of highbrow, over-intellectual thinking. We also wanted to talk to global voices. So to complement that heavyweight intellect of the kind of people that you see on the left there, we also wanted to hear from everyday global citizens on the front line of their culture or subculture, because we recognise that everybody has a part to play in thriving, in turning all of that, to giving giving a voice to people with a fresh and smart perspective on how to thrive in the 21st century. Now, the point about this is whether you are a startup entrepreneur in Bournemouth or Beijing, or whether you're a homeowner in Helsinki or Hyderabad, if they have something that is valuable to the rest of the world, a nugget of wisdom, a fantastic piece of knowledge on how to thrive in the 21st century, we wanted to hear from those people. Now, the third source, will come of no surprise, is the expertise that exists in this very room to fill that Thrive Mind as well. So obviously you have voices within your existing partnerships from the rugby sevens and badminton and cycling, but of course within your own organisation as well. And we know that you have an international manager scheme, so we were potentially suggesting that as part of that international manager scheme, people go to branches all around the world and bring back the wisdom that they encounter on how to thrive in local markets. So, we have some partner agencies here today, and I think one of the things that we wanted to stress on that day 2 months ago is we want to think of those three or those three sources of wisdom as knowledge generators, three sources of story. And we wanted to work with your creative agencies to inject that into your communications. Here's how that could look. And you don't need to get overly concerned about the complexity of this chart, other than to say is, if you look at the top left there, you have the knowledge partners. So there might be some individual pieces of content that we could push out through your paid, owned and earned network, or indeed from the global voices, or from indeed from the HSBC voices, or we could recombine them into recombine them as almost like Lego bricks into telling a different story as well. Let me explain what I mean through just using one media in particular. So we have video here, and we may wish to push the School of Life, the importance of optimism through Alan de Botton, or indeed some specific videos about what is a sustainable business or how to absorb cultural influences, or we proposed cutting them and remixing them up to tell a broader story, perhaps why a home is more than a house, something like that. But the existence of that content is secondary to actually the way that that content is propagated, is spread, is amplified. And we did say that these are the best ideas captured, accumulated and spread being the operative word here. So of course there's some fantastic owned opportunities in HSBC alone. You have your ATM screens, you have branch communication, you have your CSR program, and of course you have your website and your social media. But of course also teaming up with the knowledge partners that I mentioned earlier on, you also have access to their owned networks as well, co-branded content pushed out through their own networks. So, as I mentioned, it would start on your website, and of course we would have those little videos of how to thrive in the 21st century. But also users could submit their own, also 15-second piece, and there would be a voting system to bring the more, should we say, more poignant or the more relevant to the fore. And of course, as I mentioned, there would be the earned opportunity as well. So this is the School of Life website. So Thrive Mind content would also exist on a Knowledge Partners website, and also potentially exist in book form as well. So again, to reiterate, that was the pitch concept on the day, but the reason that we like that is that we think, again, that it ticked three boxes. First of all, to build on the ideas that Rohan was talking about, is that it captured, accumulated and shared the best ideas for thriving and put them in one place. Then, as you've seen with Source earlier on, we can quantify the potential impact of those brand activities to help you land the activity I've just described in market. And also, of course, it's going to make it thrive by harnessing collective strength to close the gaps in people's minds, as you've heard, and help them build their sense of prosperity.
Hello everyone, my name's Hannah. I'm a strategy lead on CMB, and I'm going to be joined by Matt shortly, who's the innovation lead on CMB. Delighted to be working on the business, particularly on CMB, and I'm going to take you through our pitch response to the Belt and Road brief, the BRI initiative. So starting with the objectives, we were tasked to drive awareness of BRI and to position HSBC as the expert on BRI and really demonstrate the expertise. But ultimately it's about supporting quality conversations with relationship managers that will drive revenue. And we started investigating the task by looking at the category and at the audience to really understand what the opportunity was. And our first observation was that it's a once-in-a-generation business opportunity. The scale of the figures around it are absolutely staggering. So it's covering 65 countries, over 22 industry sectors, over 900 projects are already started, and there are various different investment figures in the trillions of dollars, depending on where you look. The figures are absolutely staggering. And it's not surprising, therefore, that consumers are finding this project a little bit confusing. And some qualitative research that we undertook discovered that potential participants in the BRI are exasperated by the complexity and the scale of the problem. So they recognise that it is a big opportunity for them, but they struggle to find what their actual opportunity is and how they might access that, the kind of jurisdictions and protocols that they might have to go through, and the financial solutions that are available to them. But the good news is that HSBC is uniquely placed to help them to navigate the BRI. And I don't have to say these things to everyone in this room. HSBC has 150 years of heritage in Asia, the leading international bank in China, an institution in Hong Kong. There is no other bank that has the same profile. However, they like to claim that they do. So competitors at Citibank and at Standard Chartered like to talk about their experience in China and their expertise on the BRI. So in order to differentiate HSBC from these other banks, we need to do more than just make claims. So we believe that the opportunity within media is to take HSBC from BRI thought leader to BRI facilitator, actually helping individuals to find their way on the BRI. And to show how we hope to do that, we'll start by looking at the target audience. Now, the broad target audience is financial decision makers, including the C-suite of companies who are going to make investment decisions around the BRI. And that broad audience is important when we are trying to move brand metrics around HSBC's BRI leadership. However, if we want to go one step further and actually help individuals to find their own opportunities within the BRI, we need to understand a little bit more about who they are and what their interest is, which is why we intend to create interest-based microsegments using a variety of data sources, so hopefully any first-party data that HSBC can provide us with, IP location data from the likes of, in the UK it would be Dun & Bradstreet, somewhere like Hong Kong it might be more like Bliss and Factual, job function data, which can be found on sources like LinkedIn, and all of this enriched by semantic information, understanding the topics that, that users are actually consuming. And cross-matching all of these sources, we hope to be able to identify that an individual might be working within the C-suite of a logistics company in Hong Kong with an interest in trading through African sea routes, for example. And it's the creation of these interest-based microsegments which is fundamental to the delivery of the core idea, which is opening access to prosperity for HSBC and their clients, creating new revenue streams by targeting these interest-based microsegments with relevant BRI opportunities. I have a short video to explain this.
For BRI, HSBC will not just use media as media, they will use it as a sales channel, surfacing up relevant BRI opportunities directly to the people that matter, fusing opportunities, locations, and audience segments, and delivering through online display, social ads, and native placements. HSBC, opening access to prosperity.
Okay, so in order to deliver this, we've identified 3 roles for communications and 3 kind of stages that we need to go through. They are assert, alert, and convert, and they really conveniently rhyme. So the first stage is asserting HSBC's BRI expertise. The second stage is about alerting BRI investors to relevant opportunities, and that's where you might see a little bit more of the kind of media innovation that we brought out in the pitch. And finally, convert is about actually activating those interested audiences. And we'll start by going through assert, which is asserting HSB's BRI leadership. And this is, because it's about building positive associations, we want to be using really engaging channels and formats here. And our target audience is still quite broad, because we're still moving quite a broad brand metric. And so it's still that broader business decision maker audience. Now, because it's about using really engaging channels and formats, content is going to be really important. But actually, that's something that HSBC are already doing really well. So the content that we kind of looked through over the pitch that's been produced for the BRI Hub, that's been across paid owned channels and with media owners for the last 1.5 years, has been really brilliant, engaging human stories around the BRI. And it's head and shoulders above anything that the competitors are doing. So we want to actually, we're not going to change that. We want to build on that really existing strong approach. We need to think, but we want to think more about what kind of channels we can use to start to distribute that content. And we use our channel allocation source within tool within Source to do that. And there are a number of kind of data inputs that go into Source to make sure that we have the right data to select the right channels, including audience channel propensity data and CPM data for all channels, all markets, for multiple audiences. We go through a regular process to make sure that we've got all the accurate figures in there. And reach potential, and that's all crunched to understand a cost per reach point for each channel, which when matched with how well it fits the role for comms, helps us to select channels. So for this brief, for this stage, it's about publisher partnerships, social media content, digital out of home, and contextual video and display. So just going through those, starting with publisher partnerships. As I've said, this is something that HSBC has been doing really well on the BRI already, but we'd be looking to exploit those across print, digital and events, and trying to work with the publishers in a way where we don't just surround BRI content, we actually appear to lead the agenda with some really kind of thought-provoking views on the BRI, and also looking at how we can utilise data to better understand who is consuming the content to further inform our own kind of audience knowledge and what points of the content they're genuinely interested in. We can then look to scale some of those pieces, so the hero pieces through social media, choosing relevant channels like Twitter and LinkedIn, or it might be MyMy in other markets. Another opportunity would be in digital out of home, actually providing a physical presence for HSBC's BRI leadership in relevant areas, CBDs. I think this mock-up is Hong Kong, but I think in the London pitch we had one in Canary Wharf. And obviously the opportunity with digital is that it's a more engaging channel, a more engaging canvas than a static panel, and it also enables us to be more kind of timely and relevant with messaging. And finally, we can look at contextual video and display to drive further reach, and we can start to be maybe a little bit more targeted around category, for example. So that's the first stage, which is assert. But I'm now going to hand over to Matt, our Innovation Director, to take you through the second stage.
Thanks. So within this layer of activity, what we're looking to do is to alert potential investors to investment opportunities that they might not necessarily have thought about yet, that whet their appetite and compel them to act. This is really where our media starts to take on a natural extension of your sales function. But given the myriad of potential investors and investment opportunities that are available through the BRI, it's not enough merely to reach business decision makers at scale. We must reach them with what we've termed as actionable investment opportunities that compel them to act now. So if, for example, we're reaching one of the micro segments that Hannah was explaining earlier in the way that we construct it, so in this particular example, a logistics executive within Hong Kong, probably makes more sense, rather than to talk about the scale and the BRI at a macro level, to talk about the Port Lamu in Kenya has just been given the green light for expansion. Therefore, how might we take advantage of that increased capacity and finance their expansion plans to take advantage of that capacity? And whilst we work with your relationship management function to determine what the most relevant investment opportunities are for each of these different micro segments. Where, in our experience, where dynamic media and messaging of this ilk to drive lead generation really starts to thrive is when it can feed on as many variables in media and messaging as possible, which is why we'd like to go one step further and not just seed these investment opportunities, but start to deliver the reasons to believe in those opportunities at the same time, such as in this following example that we created with a piece of desk research, which would indicate if we were to put a rail link between these 2 points on the Belton Road, we could save the time it takes for people, for product, for raw materials to move between these 2 points by a period of 4 hours. And whilst this is kind of a chronological benefit, we could potentially translate that into an economic benefit depending on the type of audience that we're looking to connect with. And whilst this sounds great in theory, unfortunately, it will be impossible to achieve at any meaningful scale using manual desk research techniques alone. I'll be on Google all the time finding things as opposed to managing your campaigns, which would not be ideal. Which is why we'd like to introduce you to a concept and a tool that we shared within the original pitch brief called the HSBC BRI Advisor, which is an AI tool that we would love to develop together in the future, which will do much of that heavy lifting for us. And it's a tool that's double-faceted. It's going to work below the line as well as above the line. In the first instance, it'll be a tool that sits within the desktop of your relationship management function and categorising each of those 900 investment opportunities across the 22 different sectors and understanding what the real opportunities that sit underneath that for the sector, role and regions that we're looking to activate within. This will really start to inform more fruitful conversations between your relationship managers and either current clients or potential clients. And if we're sending hot leads into your business, we feel that this tool will help convert those leads into financial arrangements. But where it starts to get really exciting is where we can start to use this similar tool to power our above-the-line communications and start to automate the generation of those insights and those evidence points as per the Temes Danukas example. But in order to do that, we're going to need to train the tool on some extremely large and diverse data sets, such as, for example, we'd plug into an API from Google's traffic layer, which powers Google Maps and sort of visualizations such as this, to be able to help us to understand within the region where it's fast and where it's slow, and what the reasons for that might be. And if we were to increase the carriageway from a single carriageway to a dual carriageway, what the resultant gains in capacity might be along that route, as well as efficiency in terms of the speed of travel through that particular route. But this is just one data set that we can look to ingest. We can look to, for adjacent signals within shipping and flight tracking to understand the flow of people and products from east to west, and again, how this might need to change over time, given the burgeoning middle classes within the emerging markets within this region. We could also look at softer signals of efficiency and effectiveness, such as mobile connectivity and pollution data, which might be able to surface more progressive or sustainable investment opportunities or evidence points for existing opportunities that might compel people to act. Once we'll take these different data streams and plug them into a relational database, and by analysing and tracking them over time, we'll get either thousands of alternative investment opportunities or evidence points for existing opportunities that can start to power our communications. Again, classified by industry, role and location, and then where it gets really exciting for us from a media perspective is that this tool will be plugged directly into our marketing technology stack that Chloe will be explaining a little bit more on later. So it will start to power our dynamic media and messaging and help us to understand whether it's just the investment opportunity that gets somebody to pick up the phone or the evidence points that underpin those opportunities or the combinations of both that compel people to act and drive those leads into your business. And once we've got this plumbing in place, and there's quite a lot of plumbing that we'd have to put into place in order to activate in this particular way, we'd then look to reach your audience through the fundamental channels, all selected through source in the same method that Hannah walked through a second ago. And whilst these are primarily digital in nature, we'd flex and scale and adapt these based upon the availability of your target audience in the different markets that we'd look to activate within. So in the first instance, we'll serve these investment alerts programmatically and contextually. So if we know that we've got a particular target audience and from their behaviours that we've indicated that they're in market or potentially in market, we could serve through environments such as LinkedIn because we know they're, from an audience perspective, more likely to act. Or if somebody's reading on a particular article or an adjacent article, we can then serve contextually and again direct them through towards a conversation with your relationship managers. But for any really important people, we're cognizant that digital media might not necessarily be enough to compel them to act, which is why we'd like to go one step further And for your most valuable prospects, we'll create a personalised edition of the trade titles that we know that they subscribe to, and deliver a future success story as a personalised cover wrap that we delivered to their desks that depict that we've managed to work together on this particular project in order to help that person or that organisation that they work for take advantage of the increased capacity in the region. But for any really, really important people, because this has got a slightly higher cost per contact, we deliver headsets alongside that issue so they don't just read about that particular opportunity, they can immerse themselves in it at the same time. And we see this type of technology not just being something that we use to send to people, but we can start to integrate it in the same way that you have done at Davos or through the Tech Connections event recently. And we can start to transport it into other areas, whether you're hosting or sponsoring different exhibitions. And whilst the tactics that we've shared through here are varied in nature, we judge them all against common KPIs, either in their ability directly to drive leads or indirectly via some of the remarketing techniques that Hannah's going to walk you through now.
Thank you. So the final stage is convert. So quite simply, it's delivering a really strong conversion message, activating those interested audiences to get in touch with the relationship managers. Simply, we would be retargeting those interest-based microsegments, the ones who'd interacted with our communications, using a DCO message, ideally featuring an opportunity that they had engaged with, using a really strong multifunctional kind of ad unit with a clear click to call, click to email, even possibly with a kind of chatbot interaction, offering kind of an initial conversation. And then the relationship manager could be alerted via SMS or via email. And crucially, with the context of what that user has actually interacted with to ensure that they can genuinely have a quality conversation. So simple. The next step would be to build the media plan. And as Mark talked about earlier, we make sure that we do that in a scientific way using all the data that is available to us through our planning tool Source. And we use multi-channel investment allocation curves, which look at the channels that we've selected and with the inputs of reach and CPM data for every market, every channel and every audience, we understand the optimum investment level that you can reach before you get diminishing returns and start building excessive frequency instead of reach. And it's this data which we put into our media plans with media plans for each stage. We make sure that we align relevant KPIs. So for the assert stage, which is about asserting BRI leadership, we would be looking at broad brand metrics from brand surveys, and media metrics would be around reach and engagement. But for alert and convert, it would be about driving revenue and about the quality and quantity of leads that we've delivered. So finally, we would make it magic by making media an extension of HSBC's sales arm. We would make it work by targeting interest-based microsegments with dynamically created investment opportunities. And we would make it thrive by connecting marketing and sales through the power of AI. Break now. I get to announce the break. Everyone can have a cup of tea.
Should have got some applause for that.
Cool. So, hi everyone, I'm Chloe. We're going to get started with the second half of the presentation, which is going to be focused on data, technology and digital. So it's good that you're all refreshed and you've had coffee, because we're going to get into some detailed areas here. So a big part of the brief that we received from HSBC was focused on digital operations, and it was really focused on three particular areas. The first was data and analytics, and more specifically our agency tools and how they enable us to use data throughout our whole planning process. Then online acquisition, how we can create a really strong and future-proofed online acquisition approach. And then thirdly, evolving your digital operations. So there was a focus on how we can help you develop talent within your business and become less reliant on an agency over time. So we're going to start with data and analytics, and your specific question, or HSBC's specific question in this area was, how do our agency tools enable us to use data for better insights, planning, measurement and optimization? And the best way to demonstrate this is to walk you through our marketing platform, which is here. So it looks a little bit overwhelming, but I'm going to try and simplify it and take you through the process that we would go through. And on the actual pitch day, we actually did demonstrations of all of these. So I'm going to try and bring them to life without many more visuals than this. But here we go. So this is our marketing platform. It's our single data environment and interface for our planners, strategists, campaign optimizers to work through an overall campaign process delivery through to optimization and measurement. So we start with Source at the top here, which we had a short video on earlier presented by Mark, which is our strategic planning and collaboration workflow system, where all our teams working on the brief would interrogate the brief, identify the role for communications, determine the audience approach, work on the channel investment approach across paid, owned and earned, and investment strategy as well. From there, once we've got an overall approach to the brief, we then work in our audience building tool to get a more specific audience approach. In this environment, we're starting to create those custom audiences, those individual segments that Hannah spoke about earlier in the BRI brief. And then once we've created the audiences, we can plug them into our inventory planner, which is where we create a more detailed delivery plan. So basically, this would go into the level of detail around the publishers, the formats we're going to use, the pricing of those publishers, their historic viewability, all the details you need in order to approve a plan and get the optimal reach required for the campaign objective. In parallel to doing a publisher plan, we're also in our dynamic creative planner, where we're collaborating with your creative agencies and people within HSBC to ensure that the messages that we're serving are most relevant to the individual segments that we've determined to be targeted for this campaign. The Dynamic Creative Planner does what the name says, which helps us to create individual variants and versions of creative related to specific audiences. So we're not serving everyone with the same message, it's much more tailored to what they're interested in. And this specific Dynamic Creative Planner is really powerful because it is all planned off the back of the audience plan. And it allows everyone to collaborate. So through the process, obviously, creative agencies is likely to be building the versions, but people within HSBC can also log into the platform to see the versions of the creative and approve them throughout. From there, these platforms then plug into the trading and delivery platforms. So that would be, for example, your ad server, DoubleClick, or it could be a buying tool such as DBM or Amazon. And that's where the audiences and creative come to life and the publisher plan is delivered. From there, all the data from the delivery platforms is plugged into two key areas. The first is our Insights platform. This is a really powerful tool for collecting, harmonizing, processing, and visualizing the data from the campaign. So once we've got all the data in one place, from search platforms, social platforms, ad servers, from your media plan tracker, we're then able to visualize the budgets, the delivery, and the performance of the campaigns. And these can be rolled up at a business unit level, campaign level, business unit level, market level, regional level, global level, into different visualizations and dashboards for you all to have access to. It's a really important platform as well for our teams because it means they spend less time in spreadsheets and more time drawing insights from this platform so that they can make more informed decisions about how to optimize the campaign. The data is also flowing into the attribution MMM solutions that you might be working with. So if you're working with a particular digital attribution tool, or you've got a team in-house, which now we understand you do, who's working on digital attribution, we can make sure all the data is flowing through to them. And then likewise, we also know HSBC works with New Star Market Share for MMM modelling, so we would again be making sure that all plan and delivery data was flowing into that platform for your econometrics work. So that's our end-to-end process and how our agency tools enable us to use data throughout. And these tools are available to use at a global level, but also at a local level for campaign delivery. But alongside our individual tools, we also have a number of services that help answer key marketing questions of our clients. So key marketing questions that we often come across would be, which message should we serve, or which message performed best, and how do we optimize that? Or for HSBC, it might be, how do we combine HSBC first-party data with partners or walled garden data to get better insights back? Or, of course, the age-old question of which of our marketing activities are driving the best results. Now, these are not new questions by any means, but through our data and analytics services, we're able to answer them with more certainty than ever before. So with that in mind, we have 5 areas that we focus from a data and analytics perspective, and have the skills, methodologies, and resources across these areas to service HSBC. So the first is data management, second, technology and data strategy, third, data-driven planning, fourth, data visualization, and finally, analysis and attribution. But overall, I think what's more important is that along with offering these services, we're really focused on partnering and enabling in-house teams to be stronger in each of these areas. So what we often find is not all clients need all of these areas. They may have in-house teams, but they need either us to bring the data partnerships or more insight into the technology that we're using in order to make their in-house data and analytics capabilities stronger. So an example of that might be around data management or technology and data strategy. So we know that HSBC has recently made the decision to work with Adobe from a DMP perspective. So in this area, you could work with our DMP consulting team to ensure that it's rolled out in the most effective way, and also that there's clear use cases and high adoption across your markets, because it's a very big investment and you want to make sure you're making the best use of it to improve your marketing activities. On a more day-to-day basis, you obviously benefit from our data-driven planning approach, which I think has come across in some of the briefs in terms of our approach to audience creation and using the insights in terms of how we would approach your briefs. Or on a more measurement basis, we'd work closely with your partner, New Star Market Share, to ensure that your approach to econometrics is always evolving, and again, you're able to tap into the specialists within our business to give greater insight to those MMM models and make them more actionable when they feed back into the investment strategy. But one particular area of importance we wanted to highlight when it comes to data and analytics is the area of identity management. So, what is identity management? Well, it's the process of connecting different data identifiers about an individual so you can get a more holistic view of that particular person. So, for example, we may start with an ID from one of your internal systems, such as your first-party data, and we may connect different identifiers, such as the places we know they've been offline. Maybe they visit schools often, or the places they've visited across the web, the types of content they're reading. Or it could be information about their TV viewership behaviour or broader interests, or their job profile on LinkedIn. And we were able to get more of these data points connected and mapped together. We get a more holistic view of that identity. And why is this important? It's important because obviously it's quite centric to people-centric marketing, because the more you know about people, the more the more insights we can have about where they are in the purchase journey, and also serve the more relevant communications that deliver on their needs. So this is not a new concept, and I think at HSBC you already have a lot of projects internally around identity management of your own customers. But what's important is how, as an agency, we can bring in data partnerships and additional mapping graphs, identity graphs, to strengthen your internal identity approach. And our approach to this space is quite different because what we don't focus on is creating an agency ID or our own in-house identity solution. What we're really focused on is helping HSBC create a stronger identity solution in your business. So it's something you keep in your business, we can enrich it, your data isn't used on any other clients, and it really is something you can use more broadly across your business for things like on-site personalization or better email communications. So that's just one example of how we would help your in-house team become stronger from a data and analytics perspective. But this approach to identity management is kind of representative of how we work generally. Mark introduced these 3 principles earlier in the day. in the morning, and these apply likewise to data and analytics. So from an open perspective, we have 100% transparent practices, so your team can work with ours to understand the models we use, how our technology works, the data partnerships that they're bringing in. And as mentioned previously, data assets we produce can be owned by HSBC in your environment so that you can use them more broadly in your business. We're completely unbiased, so we don't invest in any data, media or technology companies. So when we're producing solutions, it's for HSBC's benefit rather than us creating something for our own benefit. And we can completely integrate with any of your existing partners. So we already work with a lot of the vendors you work with in terms of DoubleClick and Adobe and Eloqua, and therefore can integrate quite seamlessly into our way of working. And finally, from an integration perspective, we also have the ability to help you transfer some of these capabilities in-house, and we've already kind of mapped out what that would look like from a digital or a data analytics perspective. So that was a bit of a taster of our data and analytics capabilities and our agency tools. I'm now going to hand over to Bex, who's going to take you through how those come to life in an acquisition approach.
Perfect, thank you. So as part of the brief, one of the questions that was asked to us was really, how do you construct and how do you deliver a best-in-class approach to digital acquisition marketing? And as a specific part of the brief, the requirement was to make sure that that approach was deliverable and sustainable across all of the markets that HSBC operate within. So for us, it was about delivering a data and best-in-class approach that's based on audience-first capabilities and understanding. We'll talk a little bit about that shortly. Making sure that we unlock the capabilities of data and technology to grow sales, and also making sure that actually once we've got that into a best practice and best efficiency approach, how we really start to drive more future growth through tactical testing and optimizations, and making sure that actually everything we do is underpinned by the technologies that Chloe just talked about. So as part of the brief, we sat and said, actually, let's forget where we are right now and let's look to the future and imagine where we want to be in a year's time. And what are all the processes and things we want to put into place to make sure that we're able to deliver it. So if we rewind to right now, or 365 days, from where the pitch occurred, you'd actually see that it's time for us to start putting audience back at the heart of everything that we do. And what we specifically mean by that is moving away from having a digital acquisition approach in the markets that chases the bottom line, that looks to outcompete competitors based on rate or on promotional offerings, and actually seeks to raise the brand much, much higher up the funnel. Because actually, when you're in that bottom of the market environment, most of the time a consumer will already have decided which brand they're going to use, which rate is the most applicable to them for the various different reasons that they're going to choose the product, or what offer is the thing that they want to convert based on. So is it £100 for switching an account? And we do that by thinking about a myriad of different things that brings the audience together. So our data signals and digital behaviours, what can we understand or imply from how people are behaving in a digital environment? What do we know about the broad demographics and who is right for the products that HSBC, First Direct and M&S Bank offer? And also, what are the consumption behaviours we see online that would indicate that we are primed to be selling our products to these different consumers? So we start, and this actually started 33 days ago because we did transition yesterday, 30 days in advance of actually starting, and that's all around making sure that our house is in order, because the reality of it is we won't be fit for purpose if we don't start to first understand things like how your technology stack all sits together. So all of those different data and analytics that Chloe talked about before, how do we make sure as the media agency we understand the tagging approach that you have across the website, how you accept people as being a converter into a different sales product online, in store or via the telephone, and moving that right the way up the kind of technology funnel into how we activate media through the ad server, how we're making sure we're tracking everything that we're doing in a holistic way so your attribution teams internally and our marketing scientists can understand the real impact that every media touchpoint has on conversion. It's also about making sure that we have the right plans in place, and actually that we have the right campaign set up, and most crucially, the right KPI framework in place, because we in media need to understand the correlation and the impacts that media delivery and media engagements have on those bottom line sales, especially if the conversion process is longer than one session, because we need to understand actually how we optimise throughout the journey, and that would be a crucially important part of what we've been doing in the last 30 days to get ourselves fit for purpose from day one. And the final one, which Chloe talked about, is actually making sure, as is crucial of all digital acquisition activity, that we can optimise every media touchpoint we have within that plan. So the AIP, the Insights platform that we talked about, is an incredibly useful and heavy featured tool throughout all of the work that we will do in a digital environment and beyond. And you'll see that play through shortly in some of the tactical optimisations we would do at a channel level. So once we're fit for purpose, we then absolutely move into that environment of creating our audiences. And one thing that you'll notice very quickly is that creating the audiences takes up to the 3 months that's within here, because the first thing we really need to understand is what has happened before. What data signals do we have? What data layers do we have? And what media have we activated in programmatic, in affiliate activity, and in search activity that's been incredibly effective before? But we also need to acknowledge, and it's one of the things that PhD does as part of its programmatic planning, that actually past approaches to audiences haven't always been effective. So you might have been buying off-the-shelf audiences that are deemed as being in market for a mortgage. And actually, if the mortgage or house buying process can be anything up to 10 months, that's an awful long part of being in market. And it can mean many different things. It can mean that you're having a look on Rightmove and seeing actually how much you might want to spend or the area you might want to live in, not necessarily correlating with you wanting to get a KIP, sorry, I forgot what the right word is, a mortgage in principle from your mortgage provider, because actually that comes further down the line when you've started to find a house. So rather than buying those big, robust segments that are in the millions and perform in many, many different ways, it's about really understanding all of the data layers that go into how we would build segments for HSBC and beyond. So we start by looking at the things that we know. Data segments such as your CRM audiences, people who come in and leave the website, and media data that's derived customers into your environments and your DMP. We broaden that to look at partners and partner data that you might have been able to collect via Wimbledon or the Rugby Sevens and other partnerships that you have in place where you might have shared access to information on consumers, them being slightly more warm to HSBC because they've touched on the brand. And then we take that into a much, much broader space where we look at aggregate data providers that give us some of the more behavioural interests and attitudinal interests that are available for us to target across the web. And we build that into a framework that helps us to understand the difference between people who are incredibly engaged, most likely to convert into a product from HSBC and are the warmest to the brand, but probably the smallest in terms of total target, right through to actually people who are cold, perhaps not yet active, broad prospects, but obviously the biggest opportunity for our business long term. And we start to build these frameworks out that actually look to append, if we're in a not yet active environment, what are the different subsegments that sit in there? How are we going to define that we want to start talking to people effectively at that top end of the funnel? And what are the data signals we're going to bring together to populate and fuel that segment ready for activation? And we do that because these off-the-shelf segments that we've been trading for in the past and for a long time and have been somewhat effective are actually too big. They're non-transparent and they don't give us the opportunity to pull all the levers that we want when we're activating in media. And our approach for HSBC is very much crafting all of those customer audiences so that we have more micro levers to pull as we go through the conversion journey. And obviously, as Chloe mentioned, one of the things that helps to pin all this together is the Agile ID and the Agile ID environment, which ultimately means as we move further and further down this approach, that not only will we have all these different sub-segments that we can dial up and down as people move through the journey, but they're all tapped against an individual ID, which means that we can better understand how to manage frequency and exposures over time against an audience, thus saving money when it comes to media impressions. It helps us when it comes to attribution modelling because we can understand the path to an individual rather than at aggregate multiple cookie levels. And it just means that everything we're doing in terms of talking to a consumer can be much more tailored and much more bespoke to an individual's behaviour, but that it aggregates up to a whole mass marketing approach that works for all. So once we've done that, we've got into a place where we have lots of different audience segments ready to activate against all parts of your business, it would be remiss of us to say that we should use the same message to everybody, because what's the point when you've defined them all? So the next layer is absolutely about building that personalised messaging, and it's building it at scale. So this isn't about having 150,000 slightly different messages in market. It's about really being able to identify what are people seeing from HSBC as the first exposure, and then how do we take those different signals of intent and move them through the journey. And more importantly, and some of you will be familiar with a level of dynamic creative at the moment, it's actually being able to react in flight to the engagement or not that occurs as a subsidiary of the media exposure. So often the approach to dynamic creative is just to show a message because you might know that that particular audience is interested in dogs and therefore you might put dog in the image. But actually this for us is about saying, our message hasn't landed well. This particular segment hasn't responded well to this message, and actually we need to do something different as a subsidiary of that, and that we do it in flight. We don't pull away from the process, change our creative around, and then push it back out. It's constantly optimizing and evolving. And we know that that reaps great rewards for our clients because it's an ecosystem that continually evolves and it's self-fulfilling. And finally, we were asked about in-channel advancements and the test, learn and adapt approach that we would deliver across individual media channels. And for the purpose of the response on the day, we just gave touched on a few different areas that we would utilise to drive innovation across all digital media channels. So the first one was around custom algorithms. So custom algorithms is an approach that PhD has to the activation of programmatic media. And what it does is it accounts for more than just the conversion rate or acceptable cost per lead that we want to deliver back to the business. It looks and accounts for other important informations and factors that should go into a rule-based approach to optimizing and dynamically bidding against a CPM. So it'll take into account past impression data that's been successful. It'll look at viewability targets to make sure that we're not just trading inventory that's not always seen. And it'll also account for attribution scoring that comes out of the modelling that you have. And ultimately creates a bespoke set of rules that we bid against at a product and sub-product level. The second area was actually to think about how we would start to fund some of these advancements at the top end of the funnel. And actually one of the ways to do that is to utilise the new Google trading mechanic within search, which is in-market audiences. So rather than having to bid for every impression that comes through for a big broad generic term such as mortgages, how can we actually start to streamline the budget out of that so we're getting more effective and efficient with how we're using it? We're online longer for those keywords because they're incredibly expensive and often we run out of money very early on. And actually, how do we make sure that we're getting as much cut through at the right stage? And what in-market audiences allows us to do is use all those data signals and behaviours across the web and define whether someone is more predisposed or not within their journey to respond to a generic mortgage ad and get through to a sale rather than to just have information consumption across the website, thus saving us money that we can move further up the funnel. And the final one was actually how we would help you with internal channels that you would manage and activate. So thinking about your affiliate marketing mix, one of the questions we're often asked by clients is, how do we really understand the effectiveness of different placements we have when we have a broad relationship with a website such as Money Supermarket, for example? And the Audience Insight platform is absolutely how we would drive that, because the data and technology insights that we have will help us to understand and help your business recognise whether it's a listing in a rate table or a banner ad or a combination of both that's actually driving the sale through an affiliate marketing channel, which again allows you to free up media investment by cutting out some of the poorer performing, potentially higher cost or more expense driving media placements that sit within that affiliate mix. And one of the reasons we know that this 365-day approach is the right one for HSBC is that we've seen from all the work we've done with our clients that at every single stage there are commercial benefits that are reaped back by the business. So these are just some examples from our internal case studies, but you can see that just by creating audience, we can drive up to an increase in efficiency of how we're activating media, right through to the importance of those in-channel advancements and beyond. And finally, none of this would be as effective as it should be if it wasn't for our optimization approach. And our optimization approach lasts from a daily perspective, so everything from making sure that our automized optimizations are actually effective and they're the right things to do, right through to the bid management and placement management that we deliver through the audience builder that Chloe mentioned before. And then, of course, back into further bigger pieces of optimization that happen at a monthly level, such as path to conversion modeling, conversion scoring and ROI conversion metrics to understand the impact of our media on return to marketing investment back into the business. And in summary, we made it magic by making sure that we built an always-on acquisition marketing ecosystem that personalises the messaging to the individual as they move through the journey. We made it work by bringing all of the technology, data, inventory and messaging together into one ecosystem. And we made it thrive by giving the team within the room at the time a little bit of insight into how we would actually use some of the advanced machine learnings and AI techniques to build a future-facing ecosystem that would support our digital acquisition modelling. That's it.
Thank you. So in addition to the acquisition strategy that Bex just went through, part of the brief was also to focus on kind of the evolution of your digital operating model as HSBC and how we can best support that. So to provide a bit more context on that, that was really progressing in terms of control, ownership and visibility when it comes to the execution of your digital channels, the ownership of your data, the visibility into that, and how you could move from a full-service agency digital buying proposition to more of a collaborative HSB-owned solutions buying team, whether that be in-house or through supported models through ourselves as well. And there were some key questions and considerations that we wanted to address with this, which was fundamentally looking at these kind of areas. First of all, how do you actually maximise and utilise the value of your first-party data assets, which are vast for a company like yourselves? How do you align all of your markets consistently to your global technology stack and start to evolve and drive innovation through that as well? And how do you continue to navigate walled gardens and device challenges, which are just going to become more and more prevalent as we continue to kind of advance in that areas as we move forward? And we've heard a lot about kind of our core underlying principles, and these are just as applicable to kind of our approach to this evolution as they are to our execution as well. When we think about being open, it's being collaborative and open to new solutions. We've actually just spent the past 2 months setting up your owned DCM networks, which will be owned solely by HSBC, giving you full control of your media data. Taking an unbiased approach, being open and, to the different piece of technology that you have and agnostic to that as well. And an integrated approach to planning, how do we look at all those channels holistically and make sure that we're driving the right value and weighting in terms of your investment? The reason we, within the pitch, kind of presented this slide is we think that we have the experience to really support this, and this is how we will approach this evolution with you. We've actually created an innovative digital operations solution for VW Group, who you've heard about earlier, which is across 26 local buying markets around some of those key areas, dynamic creative, custom audiences, attribution, which will be leveraged across those markets consistently. We manage a fully owned technology stack for Hewlett-Packard, which is a global implementation, and so that's across 60 individual markets where we're driving that from a central team as well. And then we operate a centralised buying function across all of our digital channels for SEAT, which is actually based in our Barcelona hub. In addition to that, we have done this before. With the kind of the elements that you have put forward to us within the brief, we've actually had an experience with this with Telstra, which is the largest telecommunications company in Australia. And the key thing we wanted to highlight within this is that this is an ongoing process. This was not a static implementation that we had with them where we said, okay, now you have ownership of this. We are actually continuing to this day to provide consultative support in those new areas, whether that be programmatic, whether that be search, whether that be social, so that they stay at the forefront of that as well. So how will we actually go about reaching this? We think there are 3 key areas that you really need to focus on to deliver this. The first one being people. Access to talent. How do you retain those people? How do you find those people in your key markets, whether that be Hong Kong, whether that be London? The second one being operations. How do you integrate and ensure that you have the right process to drive value across those channels and build the right structures for you to grow in the future as well? And then craft. These areas are complex in their operation, and it's really important that you as a company stay at the forefront of what is new in that area, and we want to be there to help to support that as well. And so this is just how we believe and how we are going to approach this now moving forward, now that we've been appointed, to continue to add value in every stage of this journey for HSBC, whether that be best practice for development and driving that digital excellence within our first engagements with you, whether that be looking at how we can actually maximise the utilisation of your DMP and sweat those first-party data assets within Model 2, or looking at those new and interesting inventory partnerships that we may have and the innovative areas that we can explore when you take more ownership of that in-house as well. But we don't just want to stop there. We know throughout the brief that we had in the pitch what those model 1, 2 and 3 may look like for HSBC, but we want to be part of what models 4 and 5 will be as well. And that will be things like the Agile ID that you've heard about today, more custom algorithm development and driving more innovative models within that. But also looking at more additional things like an HSBC publisher marketplace. How are you leveraging your media investment to drive relationships with individual publishers, and in the same breath, with data partners as well. You have huge amounts of first-party data, but you can always add and layer that to get more value from it from second-party data partnerships. So, in summary, to make it magic, we will have a digital acquisition approach that delivers that short-term performance, but also has a real core innovative theme within it that Bex went through. To make it work, we want to build a foundation of data analytics that help answers your marketing questions and actually gives you the answers that you need, and make it thrive. Having an open, collaborative approach to how that and partnership to make sure that you are evolving your digital model in the way that you want to, and we are there with you on that journey as well. So, hand over to you.
Thank you. So, that's it. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your attention. You may have guessed by today, we're really pleased, proud, thrilled and excited to be working with HSBC. And Andrew said at the start the pitch was super fast. Well, actually, the transition has been even faster. And again, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of everybody at PhD, for everybody in the room and online, in terms of your openness, your enthusiasm, your support and direction in terms of making sure the transition has happened according to your business requirements. Let me just give you a couple of milestones. There's been very many milestones over the last couple of months. We've onboarded 33 PH teams to activate media across 41 markets. We have 153 media professionals working on your business as of yesterday. And we've built and activated an ASP acquisition and performance hub in super quick time, and campaigns already went live last week. And naturally, we're delighted in a very integrated PhD and cultural way to start the relationships with your creative and partner agencies. So ultimately, if we think back to Project Sunshine and we think back to the vision that you have in terms of transforming financial services marketing, we are here to be a real support to deliver that. And our commitment is going to be, in everything we do against that vision, we're going to make it magic, we're going to make it work, and collectively, we're going to make it thrive. So thank you again on behalf of PhD. Thank you for Andrea, Ravi, and Victoria to making this this presentation happen. It's been a delight to reprise the presentation, and well done, PhD team, for reducing it from 3 hours to 1.5 hours for you. We haven't got time for questions, but as Andrew said at the start, any further questions, then please just filter them through, and we'll look to answer them as soon as possible. So again, on behalf of everybody, thank you very much.